Some years ago, we started a program called North American Voices, and the object of that program was to have American operas periodically in our season. And we've done that very successfully. When you look back, there have been some great shows such as A Streetcar Named Desire, Of Mice and Men, The Conquistador, The Passion of Jonathan Wade, and now we have this wonderful production of Therese Raquin. It came about because we were approached by Dallas, who wanted to do it, and they asked if we would co-commission it with them and Montreal. And by sharing the costs as we did, it makes it possible for the three companies to get a great production far less expensively than doing it on our own. And I was very happy to do this work because I knew Tobias Picker's music from his opera Emmeline, and I thought it was really terrific. I knew that he had a commission coming up at the Metropolitan Opera, and I think he's one of the bright new composers on the American scene. So for us to get involved in a new work from a living composer was a very exciting thing and very appropriate for North American Voices. One of the great things about this opera is it's very taut, it's very tight, it's 2 acts of only 55 minutes each, and the story is very, very clearly told. Fundamentally, it's a story about love, adultery, and murder. And what happens is Thérèse, who is married to Camille, falls in love with an artist named Laurent, and they together plot to murder Camille, and they drown him at the end of Act 1. But he returns as a ghost in Act 2, haunts them so much that he makes them very distressed, and they finish up suiciding because they can't live with their guilt. Now that's the main thread, but there are other threads as well. We have the mother of Camille, who has a stroke when the ghost appears to her, and she struggles to try to reveal that indeed the two lovers are murderers, but she can't quite get that out. And other people who are in the production are domino players who come to the house of Camille regularly to play dominoes. And it's they, in fact, who instigate the idea of marriage between Laurent and Thérèse about 11 months after the death of Camille. So we have all of these different threads operating together, but the story is so clear and so fundamental that I think everybody can follow it very, very clearly. It's passionate, it's exciting, it's sexy, and the terrible thing is, it's happened before. These kinds of stories of murderous lovers are not as uncommon as perhaps we would like to think.
How this works. Camille, you're in your dream world.
When this production was conceived with the three companies involved, Francesca Zambello was the stage director. But now we have her assistant coming, Herb Kellner, to recreate that production. Now, when an assistant does this, he follows the outline, definitely, of what the original director desired, but he also puts his own mark on it because he has to deal with different individuals, with different personalities, different ways of acting or presenting an idea. So Herb has really built on what Francesca Zambello had done.
That gets the two of you out of bed. You're going to come down this way, Chris, to Herb. It's very natural. You're going to get out of the bed that way and come down. In a straight play, you have to find the beats. You have to find the emotional rhythms of a speech, of a scene. In an opera, it's pretty, the beats are laid out for you. You have to find a way to play those beats, but the beats are laid out for you musically. You have to interpret those beats. And therefore, in some ways, you're more confined because if you are making up the beats, finding the beats, you can go in any direction you want to go, as long as it eventually makes sense. But when you have music on a page, and it's going in this direction, and it's the emotional underpinning of a scene, you have to go in that direction. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have to artistically interpret and visually make sense of all of that, but still you have to analyze those beats and use those beats that you're given rather than just sort of make it up. The balance really is to make sure that you don't overtax the artists with their acting when they have to find a way physically to sing some very difficult musical passages. That's where the balance comes. The balance comes in finding those places where you can push the actors to act, and in other places where you have to pull back and let them sing. Stop. Kirsten, I think if you can be a little stage right, you'll have a little more room. You can even, I don't mind if you slide and share that. As a director, when I look at a score and play it or listen to it, I'm trying to interpret what a Beethoven or a Mozart or a Wagner or a Puccini are telling me, what I think they're trying to say. But here I can go right to the composer and say, what does this mean? What do you want to say with this moment? And sometimes you have to argue it out with them. Well, I'm not sure that we can do that with that, you didn't really successfully say that. Maybe it means this, and you come to a reasonable decision that makes you both happy. But it's really great to be able to turn to him and get insight that of what was in his mind when he was writing the music, what he was hearing. So it's been great.
One more close-up just to make sure we get it.
No, we're going to do a photo op up here. Elise just said the conductor and the composer are in bed together. That's quite a trick.
The way it should be.
In the case of Therese Raquin, this masterpiece by Tobias Picker, we have him right there, and he adds his own ideas in the staging rehearsals, which we do with singers, the stage director, and piano, meaning that no orchestra is involved. Tobias was right at my left constantly, and he became a lovely collaboration and consultation.
So it doesn't have to be terribly precise.
Yes, it does. Rhythmically.
Rhythmically, it does.
Only the rhythms and the pitches. And the dynamic. Nothing else.
Oh, when you make your entrance with the dominoes and you hear him talking about the murder, don't stop behind the post. This is a great cast, I have to say. You know, Tobias has written a wonderful, wonderful opera. I think it's theatrical and it's dramatic, but it's also very difficult to sing. And this is a cast that's up to both of the challenges. Kirsten Chavez is an incredible musician with a wonderful voice. And on the other side of it, she is a tremendous thinking actress.
I think one of the most challenging and fulfilling parts of my job would be that attempt to be Thérèse in every small and big way, so that the way I carry my hands or the way I hold my shoulders or the way I do every single thing will be Thérèse. And the only way I can get there is to gather as much information as possible from the novel, from the score, and from my colleagues on stage, because necessarily my colleagues help define who I am. So I gather all of this information in the rehearsal process and beforehand, and hopefully then by the time we get to performance, every little detail is just right. And that doesn't mean that I play it the same way every time. It will be spontaneous, but it will be within certain parameters that are Thérèse. That's certainly what I aim for. The vocal part of singing Thérèse is very challenging. Tobias Picker has written it in such a way as to explore all the extremes of the mezzo-soprano voice, in my case. And I love what he's done, because he's called upon me to explore the very extremes of what I can do, and musically and vocally and artistically. And I feel like the real challenge, he's written very difficult passages, but challenged me as an artist to make them as beautiful as possible. And I think it is possible, and I think that we are achieving that as a cast. And there's some wonderful melodies, not typical melodies, but beautiful and haunting and great to listen to, and again, challenging for me as a singer to make them not only beautiful but very meaningful and full of life and art, if you will.
With an untouched brush, I wiped away astonished tears, and pulled and brushed her skin, and pulled.
Christopher Maltman is one of the best young baritones around. It's, again, a wonderfully warm voice, a terrific actor, very, very musical. He sang a recital for San Diego Opera very recently that sort of brought the house down because of the elegance of his singing.
Thérèse and Laurent's relationship is a kind of strange one because it's born out of Laurent's sort of innate laziness, really. He meets his old friend Camille in Paris and insinuates himself back into the Raquin household and lounges around there, eats there, drinks there, and just basically sort of gets a bit of a freebie there every day. And because Thérèse is there as well and pays him attention, in the book he kind of thinks, well, you know, as she's there, why not? He doesn't, however, bargain on the incredibly passionate side of Thérèse's nature and also his own feelings for her, which eventually become murderous. And the great irony for Laurent is that he, of course, kills Camille when they're out boating one day and gets the girl and gets the comfortable place, but it turns into a living nightmare for him. So it's a classic sort of story of crime doesn't pay, really.
When I close my eyes, all I see is the guilty. You are guilty, you are as guilty as I.
Laurent is a difficult character to play because you have to establish very quickly in the opera, because obviously the opera kind of drops in almost, I would say, sort of a quarter or a third of the way into the novel. And in the novel, it's very easy. You have a lot of time to establish why Thérèse doesn't want Camille, her husband, and why she wants Laurent. So the difficulty of the role of Laurent is to walk onto the stage and to immediately, for it to be obvious for the audience why she would prefer Laurent over Camille. So that's kind of difficult to start out with. But also then in Act 2, I mean, Act 1 is, the motivation is fairly straightforward. He's just going for what he wants, and he's trying to make an easy life for himself, and his laziness and his self-interest is so great that he's willing even to stoop to murder to achieve what he wants and to carve out an easy life for himself. But then in the second act, he's kind of transfigured. We're 11 months down the line, and his life, as I said before, has turned into a living hell. And for this, obviously he must have been physically attractive in some respect at the beginning of the opera, has become a desperately unattractive and desperate figure. And that transformation is quite hard, and it gets worse and worse and worse throughout the second act, just ending in a state where he's suicidal, completely without hope. And so that's always very draining to play a character who has that huge and emotional journey.
Gordon Geets is a singer I've admired for many, many years, and I also had the privilege just a little while ago of hearing him in London in a production of Sophie's Choice. Gordon, who created the role of Camille and has done it not only in Dallas but in Montreal, was the perfect choice to continue doing it here.
Is Camille a dull character or sickly? He's a bit of both. Of course, what's so wonderful in the novel, and I think something that Tobias Picker has captured so well, the atmospheric feeling of what Thérèse is living through, that she has this husband who's really not much of a man. He's been kept from really developing into anything, partly by the fact that he was sickly as a child, and then his mother has taken such good care of him that he's just ended up a full-grown mama's boy with no ambition, nothing really to say, and certainly nothing to match the passion that is in Thérèse. So in that way, she really does feel saddled, and for her, it's absolutely impossible to live with this man. My absolute favorite moment is the ending of the first act, because I think that is where everything just comes together so perfectly. The music, the urgency of the music, the situation, the way that Laurent has sort of taken it in hand and she's agreed to be his accomplice. And then, of course, with this amazing theatrical coup where I am killed by Laurent. And then, of course, the whole ending of the act, the way they've done it in the production is absolutely my favorite.
Dame Josephine Barstow was last with us in 1985 in The Merry Widow, and here she is so many years later singing yet another role with San Diego Opera.
One actually sees Madame Raquin during the course of the opera in three very, very different stages of her life and of her development. First of all, you see her in just the general tenor of her life, the way she's living with her son and with Thérèse, and she's working in her shop, and she has a good relationship with her assistant Suzanne, and everything is reasonably all right, although there's always the threat of Camille's weakness and illness. After the interval, after the murder of Camille, you see Madame, I hope that you will see Madame Raquin very much aged and enormously weakened by the shock of of losing her son. But she, at that stage, doesn't know that there's anything untoward about his death. She thinks he just was an accident and he drowned, and that was bad enough. But then she discovers that he was murdered, and this causes her to have a stroke, and that, I'm finding that extremely difficult to do, because the stroke is almost complete, so that she's paralysed totally, except for the use of her eyes. And it's very difficult, I've discovered, if you can't use your face, it's very difficult to just express yourself with your eyes, because what we do is, when we're talking with our eyes, we're also talking with our face. And that repertoire is very narrow. It's quite hard to do, and I just, mercifully I don't have to say a great deal. In fact, I can't say anything, but, I don't have to indicate an enormous amount of subtlety during that stage, but I'm finding it that quite hard to do, but we'll get there. I'm still working on it.
The cast is only half, perhaps, of the cogs that go to make up the machinery of the opera that we put on. There's an awful lot of people behind the scenes. Of course, the musical side of things is taken care of by our conductor, Karen Keltner, and she's been absolutely fantastic. It is a mammoth task for her, keeping us under control, unruly singers with an unruly drama, and I really think she deserves a medal at the end of this for both keeping her sanity and also keeping us so wonderfully together.
The score for Therese Raquin, in my opinion, is a brilliant one. It does present some specific challenges for the conductor, who in this case, in this venue, is myself. But it also opens up vistas that I hadn't imagined before. And that is always exciting for a musician, to stretch oneself and find out things about oneself in the progress of the work you're doing. The opening of the act is very engaging, of the first act. It's quite consonant, as is the entire first act. And there's no overture per se, but this beginning to the piece is quite lyrical, and yet there's this undercurrent of unrest. So we know that all is not well in the Raquin household, which is, I think, an understatement given the rest of the opera to come. What follows, of course, is a lush, very lyrical, quite melodious entire first act, with huge orchestral themes of great sweep of melody. Act 2 begins the dissolution of the characters, I believe, of Thérèse and Laurent. They are so consumed by guilt at what they've brought to bear on Camille, and inadvertently, or indirectly I should say, on Madame Raquin, who suffers a stroke when she learns the truth of this murder that's taken place. And the music reflects that. The music becomes quite disjointed at times, dissonant, angular, angry. When I mentioned unrest, just on the underside of the opening of Act 1, that unrest now has taken full bloom and is dis-ease of the highest sort in this second act. It's great to be challenged and exhilarated from that challenge. I find myself not exhausted at the end of a rehearsal, but very energized. I get a little tired later, but I'm very energized, and I notice the musicians are, and I notice that the singers are. It has that effect on you. The music is mesmerizing.
There are lots of people who are afraid of anything that they think is modern, but I want to remind everybody watching tonight that every opera has been a modern opera. Every opera was a world premiere at one time or another, and people went to them. They went to their first Verdi, their first Puccini, their first Wagner, so come to your first picker. Opera is always developing, always changing, always being interesting. And what we have in this one is this kind of sensuous music, sensuous people. We have a sexy subject about two lovers who actually leap into bed together in the first act in Camille's house. Such is their passion. You don't get that kind of passion in La Traviata, and you don't get it quite so obviously in La Bohème. But in a modern opera, yeah, you can leap into bed together. And I think that you can come to an opera such as Therese Raquin, enjoy all of the sex, all the passion, and not hate yourself in the morning.